Today is the feast of Saint Nicholas, and we're talking about the original expression of the Christian Orthodox ideals. All of you who are called Nicholas, Nicole, today is your feast day, so may God bless you and many happy returns. Now, I'm going to tell you what happened to me. I consider it a miracle, and it has to do with Saint Nicholas. Now, I didn't know much about any saint, basically, except St. Patrick, because of the St. Patrick Day parade in New York City in March. Now, I had a dream at one point when something was very, very stressing in my life, and I had a dream where I had gone into a church, and I was a little girl. In my dream, I was a little girl, like 3 or 4 years old. And I was very, very depressed, and I felt sick, and I looked sickly. And there was nobody else in the church, and this man with a balding head with a white hair, beautiful, serene, calm face with blue eyes and a white beard, came out of the beautiful gate, came out of the Holy of Holies and saw me. And then he told his deacon, "Bring my relics." So the deacon brought him a little box, and he took a little bone out of the box. The priest took a bone out of the box, and he touched me on my forehead, and I sprung back to life, like I was healthy. And he smiled at me. He said, "Oh, now you're fine." And I looked at his face, and I still remember his face. Now, at one point, I went to a church in Kefalari. It was the Church of Eleftherodria, of the Mother of God. The Europeans called her Madonna Europa. A lot of Europeans come to pray at that church, to venerate the Mother of God. And I actually met the man who told me how he painted that painting. Now, when I went to that church, after my mother had passed away, I went to have her commemorative service there. I saw an icon stand right somewhere next to me where I was sitting, and I saw the face of the man that was in my dream, that brought his relics and touched me on the forehead, and made me well. And it was Saint Nicholas in this icon that I had seen. I didn't know who he was. I didn't even ask him his name. But in order to glorify God, God is glorified by his saints. And our Lord Jesus Christ told us that there would be many saints coming after him. And every generation has saints. And I hope that all of you listening to this will become a living saint of Christ. Because, the harvest is big, and there are not enough laborers to help Christ. Now, I'm going to go into the story concerning St. Nicholas. Is written by a professor of theology, Lambros Gonzu. He says, "Our Holy Christian Orthodox Church has endless lists of bishops who honored their high mission and became living models for imitation. One of the most representative figures of the ideal bishops is the people-loving Saint Nicholas, Bishop of Myra, of Asia Minor, of Lycia, whose holy memory is especially honored by our church December 6th. Today, that is. The holy synaxary of his life is really a detailed consideration of the genuine type of the Orthodox bishop, Saint Nicholas, who was indeed a representative of the genuine bishop of the Church of Christ. His entire life was adopted to the life of Christ, whom he loved so much with all the strength of his soul, and set out to serve him faithfully. And according to the tradition of our church, he made the great decision to serve Christ and the people of God while he was still a child. He was born in the city of Patara in Lycia around 265 AD, at a critical time when paganism was fighting its last and fiercest battles against Christianity. The cruel persecutions of the last pagan emperors were well known. The obscurantist pagan sanctuaries preeminent in Asia Asia Minor, and the infamous oracles of Clarin and Apollo, the Apollo twin, had made it their primary mission to slander Christians to local rulers as ungodly and thereby making them responsible for the miseries they sent supposedly the gods to humans. Shocking case, the most terrible of all the persecutions initiated by Diocletian at the suggestion and instigation of the above oracles. St. Nicholas saw the light of life being persecuted for his faith. His pious parents, they were both Greek, brought him up with education and admonition of the Lord. They also made sure to give him a worldly education so that the young Nicholas would become a wonderful intellectual personality whose fame spread early in the surrounding area. His virtues and qualifications were appreciated by the local church of Patara, which called him to serve it, ordained him an elder, and later, when the diocese of the city of Myros became vacant, he was ordained its bishop. Clergy and people enthusiastically accepted the election of Nicholas, anticipating his exemplary pastoral action for the entire church. After he entered the ranks of the holy clergy, he ceased to live for himself, but lived only to serve the Church of Christ and all men without any distinction. After the death of his parents, he distributed his entire property to the poor of his diocese, so that now he could devote himself to his varied pastoral work, uninfluenced by personal life concerns. The Diocese of Myra became the center of the spiritual and charitable ministry of the inhabitants of the entire wider region of Lycia. Bishop NIKOLAOS became the father, the caretaker, the comforter, and the refuge for every poor, persecuted, and suffering person. He, with the infinite love and tolerance that he cherished in his chest, did not leave anyone without benefiting him and supporting him spiritually, morally, and materially. No one could explain where he found the material resources with which he met the needs of a multitude of poor people. At the same time, he became the Prussian columnist, exploiters against the weak and the poor. With rather impudence and courage, he exercised control over all those responsible for the evil demonization of the people, no matter how high they were in status. The Synaxary, the life of the saint, states that once in his days, the people of a wider region of his diocese were starving. Filled with anxiety, Nicholas went down to a port where he met a ship full of wheat that was ready to sail for France. He convinced the shipowner to keep the cargo in Lycia. He paid, unknown how, for the wheat and distributed the wheat to the starving inhabitants who were saved from certain death. Every weak man had his patron. The saint was close to everyone in every difficult situation. He benefited even miraculously. The biographer of St. Nicholas mentions many such incidents. The utterly poor saint endowed poor girls with dowries, protected the crops of poor farmers, became the helpers of sailors. To this day, he remains a patron of seafarers, thanks to his many miraculous interventions towards them. According to St. Nicholas, political power exists from God to serve the people. When it opposes the real interests and the will of the people, it must be controlled. Thus the saint soon became the controller of the persecuted emperors Diocletian and Maximian, who sent thousands of Christian martyrs to death. With unbearable personal prohibitions, persecutions, and tortures, they defended those who were persecuted for their faith. He supported them, encouraged them not to become cowards and deny Christ. At the same time, intercessor of the relatives of the martyrs, convincing them that martyrdom for Christ is the highest honor. The holy bishop, St. Nicholas, was also an exponent of the genuine and unadulterated faith of the Church. Heresy was for him an insult against God and the truth. As member of the First Ecumenical Council in 325 AD, he fought hard to isolate the heretic and blasphemer of Christ Arius. For his impudence, he was put in prison because circumstances forced him to deal harshly with the terrible heretic. Like the Apostle Paul, he considered the things of the world to be cheap, ephemeral, meaningless, truly, what's the word for it? basic, very below base. Okay, sorry about that. I'm trying to find the word. Philippians 3:8. He considered glory, money, power, social recognition to be subordinate to the ministry of Christ. Therefore, he put everything aside, and with fervor he put himself in the service of the Church of God. His entire life was an example of a true Christian leader dedicated to the ministry of God's people. St. Nicholas is indeed a model for all subsequent clergy because he was himself a faithful imitator of Christ, a real rule of faith, icon of meekness, and teacher of temperance. According to the apolitical of his feast, in 330 AD he slept peacefully, that was his dormition, old and weary from the struggle and constant ministry of his whole life. His ossified sleep became an object of veneration not only by faithful of his diocese but also by heathens and pagans who had been variously benefited by him. To this day, his tomb in Myra is a place of pilgrimage for Christians from all over the world. This is today Turkey, but also for many people of other religions who flock to honor his great personality. It is not an exaggeration to claim St. Nicholas was a genuine exponent of the Christian and Greek ideals. As a bishop, he was a representative type of the Christian bishop and the type and place of Christ according to the theology of Ignatius the God-bearer. St. Ignatius, guardian of the right faith and spiritual helper of the faithful. In addition, he was a representative embodiment of the Greek tradition, the humanitarian ideal of Hellenism, combined with the wonderful Christian humanism met in the holy person of Nicholas, were applied and became a reality. His democratic tactics and the collectivity in his actions are the experience of the ancient Greek tradition, which was saved and improved by Christian teaching and practice. That is why this great ecclesiastical man became so famous, so popular, that he's especially honored throughout the Christian world. We call him Saint Nick, Santa Claus, but they had nothing to do with the commercial Santa Claus. That is why he's especially honored by all the Orthodox and more so by the Greeks. That's why there are so many temples in his honor, churches, and that's why many people proudly bear his name, Nicholas. Now, the Christian Orthodox have a duty to honor and imitate wonderful personalities of our glorious past, like that of St. Nicholas. In gloomy times like ours, we need bright spiritual landmarks worthy of St. Nicholas. In our dire days, where we are experiencing as a nation one of the worst periods of our national existence, where the specter of economic collapse and even our annihilation surrounds us, we need the help of St. Nicholas, who saved the people in similar conditions in his time. It's enough to invoke him. Holy of God, hurry and help us because we are lost. And his relics are in Bari, Italy, by the way. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. And all of you, Nicholas and Nicoles, God bless you and many happy returns. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.